welcome back to Coffee Talk with Brandy. Today I have my special guest Andre, and once again we're going to talk a little bit about relationships. Now, I think there's so much we can talk with relationships because everybody has a different perspective and we all have different lived experiences. And Andre agreed to do the show, and we were kind of talking about, hey, what should we talk about? And he's like, well, I really liked your conversation with Rob about relationships, so we're going to talk about relationships. But before we do, if you are new here, hang out with us, hit the subscribe button and the follow, or you know what that button is. It's the subscribe button.
I think it's a bell. They have a bell.
They have a bell now?
I think so.
I'm still learning. And as you know, and I've been so honest and upfront with the fact that I'm learning all of these new skills with editing and stuff. I wish I could say it was going better. I mean, it is.
It's going great.
I'm getting there.
You got coffee? That's a good start. Yeah.
Coffee. Always. Coffee Talk with Brandy.
Cheers.
Cheers. So welcome, Andre, to the show, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I like to get a little candid on occasion. Definitely would take a little bit of caffeine, so I appreciate you providing that. And let's just get down to it.
Let's get down to it. Well, I think the greatest thing and what I like about Coffee Talk with Brandy is when you're in the presence of somebody who just has such good questions, the conversation can go forever, right? So one of the things that I was curious about is over the last 10 years, what do you think you've learned about relationships for you personally and with other people, whether it's work or, partners or whatever that looks like?
Wow. The last 10 years, a lot has happened in the last 10 years. I think I've learned a lot. A lot of it's self-discovery and rediscovery. I would say that's probably the biggest thing I've learned is I'm not done learning. I'm not done forging relationships, repairing relationships, and, I think for me, what I've learned is, you have probably more time than you think, but less time than you thought. So I tend to do things probably with a little bit more sense of urgency in my relationships now, and that's kind of a good thing, but it's also kind of a bad thing because it leads to a lot of overthinking and worrying and concern. But it's rooted in a good place, I realize I'm a little bit older now, and so I have probably less time and less relationships to have in itself, just in principle alone. Or I could be on the cusp of having more relationships, which is also kind of it's an interesting spot to be in, to kind of have uncertainty in your life and to be at the what could easily be the halfway mark. I don't know.
Oh.
So.
Yeah.
Midlife crisis? I mean.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the halfway point.
Talk about that.
The halfway point. I'm there. I'm 47, so I am halfway there. And your thought about, there could be more relationships or you don't know. I mean, we're just kind of right there. I don't know either. I want to be in a relationship. I would love to.
I might at least want to be better at them, the relationships I'm in, I want to be better at, and the relationships I want, I definitely want to be considerably better at, and so there's a different set of precedents and priorities there.
Yeah.
But it's the same goal.
This might be a hard question, and if I ever ask a question that you don't want to answer, please just say I don't want to answer.
Okay.
Well, because I always want people to feel.
Let's answer it. No.
Okay.
Let's do it.
What does better look like for you?
This better be good.
Yeah. What does better look like for you? I mean, it might not be a hard question, but what does better look like for you, Andre? How do you become better in what you bring to the table in a relationship?
How do I become better at what I bring to the table in a relationship? Honestly, I think part of that is making an honest assessment of what I am doing, what I probably can be doing, and not trying to get too caught up on what I've done. It's there to learn from and to grow from, but it's not something I want people to have the leverage to keep me in that state of their perspective, and I think we tend to try to appease people and please people who've established those roles in our lives, and that's a normal thing, but what isn't necessarily always healthy is to always try to make amends for things that you really can't. So it's do I Do I, try to be better at seeking forgiveness, or be better at realizing that forgiveness isn't something that is always on the table? Maybe, maybe there is no forgiveness for me at that stage, and maybe I'm spinning my wheels. So try not to be too regretful in what I've done, and be a lot more intentional about what I am doing going forward.
Yeah. It can be hard when we have grown from where we were, and if other people might not be able to see that. And in my own experience, not having that validation that I am different can be really hard, especially if there's somebody you're in a relationship with or whatnot. But it also came back to myself. So I guess my next question is, have you been able to forgive yourself of whatever it is that's holding you back in that way? Or
Yeah, well, I would say different. Let's go back to different.
okay.
So it's a very tricky word, because to me it's like, yeah, we're different, but we're still the same. We might not act the same or behave the same, but we're still the same. And so sometimes in relationships, marriage or otherwise, people will use different, but they'll use it in such an extreme way, like, you're not the same person that you used to be, or you're not the person I married, or whatever. And it's like, whoa, no, like, let's not get into semantics. I am the person you married. I may not be the same, but I am that same person. But you still go through, I think, a little bit of a grieving process. Mm-hmm. So when you've lost that perspective and that aspect of that person, and it's not there anymore, whether it's health issues, whether it's becoming emotionally disconnected, or just life happening, and you haven't found a way to make things work better, or whatever the case may be, different can be a problem. And it's like, how do you reconcile that? How do you reintegrate your differences into your life where you are at in the present? And what happens when you're not welcomed with these differences? Maybe someone else is in a different phase of their life, or they're just not really at a place in their journey where they're accepting of yours. So I think what the challenge for me is just really acknowledging that, there's a lot of possibilities out there, and it might be happily ever after, or it might be just after.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Let me share a little bit of something that I went through, because I was in a relationship, marriage, and we had been seeking therapy. We were going to therapy, and there just came a time, we were in therapy for 4 years, and there was just this, for me, there was this epiphany of like, this is just, it's not going to change, and I want something different. So, but the point of the story is that my therapist at the time said something that was so thought-provoking to me that it's literally followed me everywhere. And it's like, people think people only come together out of love, because that's idealized, right? Like, only two people come together out of love. But she's like, you came together out of dysfunction, and then you grew because you were working on yourself. So you grew past that dysfunction, and that just wasn't the case for my partner at the time. And so I realized at that point, she's like, rarely do people come together out of love. We come together out of familiarity. What is familiar feels comfortable. And for me, I was growing up in this environment that I paralleled in my relationship. And it just made me realize, and it gave me a lot of empathy for other people, because we vilify people sometimes, of people who choose to maybe divorce or whatnot. I mean, from my community of being in a religious affiliation at that point, which I'm no longer there, but I was judged quite harshly. It was like, you're tearing apart your family and all this stuff. And I was just like, I chose to do what I had to do because I wanted to be happy, and I couldn't do that from where I was because I grew, so there was this gap. But it just made me realize, like, ideally we want to come together out of love, but that's not always what happens. I mean, financially, there's all of these reasons sometimes people come together, and it just blew my mind to go, oh, yeah, I mean, that'd be cool if everybody just came together out of love, but I mean, we think that, but I thought it was, and then I had to, like, really kind of dive into that thought, and it led me on some great overthinking. That's not overthinking.
I would say for me, I think I kind of fumbled along the way. Like, it was never my intention, and I've said this before somewhere else, but I used to have this idea. I wanted my first to be my last. And I honestly, wholeheartedly, I think I would have been okay with that. I would have been perfectly fine with that. But that's not exactly what happened. What happened was, my first went through some real things. And, we were young, so it was like young love, and you're not really equipped. You have all the capacity to have all the feelings, but you're not really equipped with the coping mechanisms to actually sometimes have those strong relationships. And then sometimes, not to knock young love or whatever, because sometimes people make it and it's like, oh, first sight, forever. Like, that's my person, and that's what happens for some people. But what happened with me was, like, it set me on this trajectory of, I don't know how to deal with that particular issue of something happening to this person, and I can't really get past it, And so I had to learn about empathy the hard way when, and I'll just say this, it was a involuntary situation. And as a kid, when you find out your partner has been through something like that, for me, that was really hard for me to handle, and I tried to be, I guess, as mature as a kid can be about it, but, like, I don't think a lot of people, talk about those kind of things. Like, if you're dating, what happens when your partner gets date raped or something, like, as a kid?
Yeah.
Like, how do you rebound from that? And the reality of what happens in relationships and things like consent and boundaries and, not victim blaming, but also, just trying to not put yourself in certain situations, too, that are really dangerous. And it's a touchy subject. So that, for me, that led me into, the next relationship, and there was just, new things to discover that I didn't really know about. But, being young, being naive, being a late bloomer, being all these things, and just having all these ideals of myself and, more importantly, the partners that I was with, and never really quite knowing them as well as I probably should have. But all that seems like hindsight. So, I don't know. I don't know if that answered the question, but, like, all I know is, I got a lot of learning to do. I feel like I got a late start on everything, and I feel like I don't think I ever recovered from being so naive. I think, like, you realize, oh, this is a whole other person. This isn't my ideal anything. This is another life, another perspective, and there's no guarantees with that. Like, it's like those old Polaroid pictures, now, I mean, they're old enough to where they're becoming popular again, where you take a picture and it's not fully developed, but you're seeing as it comes along. And that's what we're offering to each other. We're offering each other these undeveloped pictures and trying to see what comes out within that, and then we have to, reconcile that with what we've given each other. So I think that's the challenge for me.
Yeah. Well, I like that analogy about the Polaroid and kind of coming into focus. And I do appreciate the fact that the desire to constantly learn, because I also am learning. I'm imperfect. I have a lot to learn. And I feel like, to me, gaining that empathy and really learning to take perspective for people when we're with people, like, how do we learn from them? Like, I need to learn and a ton of stuff, but, like, I know as a woman, even today when I was walking with my son down the street, I said out loud, oh, do we need to cross sooner? And my son was like, why? And I'm like, well, there's a bunch of guys up there. We as women have to avoid as much as we can to be safe. And so it's like, it's a different world to keep ourselves safe. And I mean, it's a whole deep conversation, because I know that you were young going through what you were going through. And I was also, quote, a late bloomer, and I had no idea just how unsafe it really was and still is for me at times. So, and, you know, it's just hard. Like, we're all learning. I like the fact that you are striving to learn more. And I think that's, to me, what relationships are. It's that back and forth. And how do we come together and create those open conversations with somebody that we're intimate with? Because that's what creates the intimacy. But it's a participating, event for both parties. And I haven't exactly had that either. So I don't know. I'd like to have it.
Yeah.
But I also notice when I become, like, if I start to have feelings for somebody, people just think, oh, you're just so assertive and all this stuff. And I am, for the most part. However, there's still parts of me that I need to heal within relationships and within an intimate relationship. So if I have feelings for somebody and they have feelings for me and we're kind of coming towards each other, I fear abandonment. So I kind of withhold certain things. And it's not that I want to. I'm logically going, wait a minute, I need to assert my needs. But because of this fear, I'm balancing that. So I don't know if that parallels with, just kind of what you were saying. But it's like, it's hard. Relationships are super hard. It's not easy.
Well, it's bizarre because, like, I hear what you're saying. And I, I've been there too. And I also observe things too. Like, for instance, sometimes it seems like relationships, like let's just say, like, I love you, right? Like, people are, without seeming like a prude or whatever, however people are labeled these days, but people are so quick to do everything but say I love you sometimes. And then now it's like a shift where people are using the word I love you so cavalier. It's like, oh, your coworker, your cat, your dog, your everything, like, and it's different. It's not the same. But my thought on that is, I think it's complicated. We're complicated creatures. We're coming with all our insecurities and everything else, all our strengths and stuff. And then there's those moments, those bumps in the road, and those things that really kind of put our perspectives in check. And we have to figure out how we're going to respond to this. It's going to be a fight or flight situation. Am I doing the chivalrous thing? Am I doing the conditioned response? What am I doing in relation to what I should be doing? And how have we been conditioned overall in our roles that we play? And what happens when someone decides, you know what, I don't want to play that role anymore? And it gets complicated, I'd say, for men and women, when it comes to safety and things like that. Because, like, one of my biggest hang-ups is I feel like I have the right to fight for something that's mine. And, when I say mine, I don't mean like an ownership, but it's mine as long as it's mine. Our relationship, the agreement, or, marriage, whatever, I have a right to that, and if people don't agree, they feel like they have a right to, kind of collectively gang up on you in your personal life. And I think social media and all that stuff, it exacerbates it. So it's like, if you want to fix your marriage, you have to fix it on so many different fronts now, or your relationship or whatever. There's things that come directly at you, indirectly, and it just seems like things are totally different than they used to be. And I don't know if it's better. I mean, I think it's probably considerably a lot more complicated, because you don't have to leave the comfort of anywhere to have problems come straight to you, whether it's being inundated with whatever's going on out in the world, and it just comes constantly in your news feeds, and how we engage. And to kind of like tie that in a little less confusing bow, I will say this: like, when you were in a relationship last, how many times, or not necessarily how many times, but do you remember your conversations? Were they organic, or were they prompted by things that were a result of what was going on in social media, what the topic of the day was the buzzwords of the news? Like, I want to get back to a place where a relationship is more spontaneous and it's more about the people than the atmosphere that the people are in and what they're bringing back, to the table in their relationship. Like, go throughout your day, and then it's like, okay, when is your day done? Do we talk so much about your job and all these other things, or do we talk about, what do we talk about now? Are we just reacting and reflecting on everything else? Like, when do we get back to the us part?
Yeah. Well, in my own relationship, I've only really had one, which sounds crazy to say.
Well, that makes it a little less, no, I'm just kidding.
I know. So many people, this is the funny thing. Like, I've been dating 11 years, so guys will ask me, so how long have you been single? And I'll be real, I'm like 11 years. And they're like, well, what's, basically trying to ask what's wrong with you. And I'm like, well, how about we reframe that to go, I wonder what's going on. Like, yes, I'm imperfect. But why blame me? It's like, I would like to be in a relationship and it's just difficult. But in that one relationship, that's where I had to choose to move forward for myself. And there was this great advice I got one time that was, we can't force people. People are where they are, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if, my ex just was not somebody who was a deep thinker. We'll just put it that way. He just was not a deep thinker. And I needed more out of my relationship. And my therapist said to me, because I have been single and I've seen her a number of times still, because I love her. But she says, you need more in a relationship than other people do. And that really struck me too, because as a deep thinker, you and I have been talking, we're both kind of deep thinkers, I'm a deep thinker. And so I need somebody who's not afraid to dive. And so many people just aren't there, and that's okay. Like, that's where they're at. That's for me why I'm still single, is a lot of people don't want to dive deep, and I can't hang out in shallow waters for very long. And maybe this is exactly why I'm single. I'm very curious. So it's like on a date, I may ask deep questions, and it's not because I have an agenda. It's because I'm curious about somebody. And people oftentimes, when you're in the presence of somebody who truly cares about people, like, they can feel that. And so there's these great conversations I've had on dates. And then there's also, I see the fear, like, oh my gosh, I just told this woman something like very vulnerable and intimate, and I'm going to go run and hide. Literally have experienced that. But, it takes two, from my perspective, it just takes two people. And if one person is deep and the other is not, and then at what point, how do you come together through that? Like, I don't know. That's everybody's own personal things, but those are questions to push back into the thinking, because I don't have an answer. I'm just, everybody's different and people want different things, but I personally need to dive deep. I cannot hang out in shallow waters. It just bores me. I'm like, oh great, how's the weather today? Yeah, how's the office? I'm like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, deep thinking. Yeah, I definitely probably overthink. I wish I could kind of relax a little bit more, and honestly, being shallow for a little bit would probably be like a bit of a reprieve for me and for whoever I'm with.
I get it.
Because it's just like little things. Like, I could be watching a movie and it's like, I will totally destroy the experience because I'm like, all right, that's the murderer right there. I know, because I've seen the reflection of the scalpel in the mirror at the beginning credit scene, and they didn't pick up on that, and that's the murder weapon. That's going to, like, just a whole big thing, right? And I'll be right. Like, so much to the point, it's like, oh God, can we just watch the movie? I'm like, yeah, we can, but like, do you really want, like, they're leading you by the nose. Like, do I want to ruin the experience? No, but like, that's just, I don't know. Maybe I could have just been quiet and just enjoyed the movie.
Well, that's funny.
For like 2 whole hours.
What I'm gathering and what I hear is that you're an extroverted and you're an external processor. External processors tend to kind of talk through things while they're processing it. And I'm an external processor. Ask my children. They're like, Mom, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just processing this thought. You don't have to answer. But
right, like, are you narrating the discipline you're giving me right now? Like,
it was so freeing. I literally, in the last several years in my work, we got to do so many trainings. And when I learned about the external processors, I felt like heaven. Because I feel crazy crazy sometimes when I'm just processing all these things.
Found your tribe, like, oh, that's my tribe.
Yes, and because I am an external processor, and so I could see you possibly identifying that way. I don't know if you are. I'm just saying, if you're processing the movie with somebody and they're like, can you just shut up? Which I would get,
right.
but I get it. Like, I'm an external processor, so,
Well, on the flip side, because I've been in a relationship where, like, that's the case, I'm aware of when other people are doing it, and now it's like, I have the benefit of being just as equally annoyed, but I do the same thing. And so I'll call somebody else, and I'm like, oh, dang, now I feel bad because, like, I'm totally that guy. You know what I mean? But not, like, just any person, but, like, I'm watching a movie now with my youngest. I'm like, are you going to talk to the whole movie? Are you going to watch it like this? And it's like, wait, that's exactly what you do. And so it's like, I get that from you. So it's a weird dynamic. And I think that puts things in perspective. Like, you're literally taking someone else's inclinations, personality, and all that, and there's a lot of crossover, a lot of bleed over. It rubs off on you.
Yeah.
And so you start reacting often and behaving in ways that they do. And then when they start, and this is kind of like a little epiphany I had, like sometimes they grow from that, but you're still reflecting the way that they were towards them, and it's like, hey, that really bothers me when you do this. I was like, but wait a minute, that's how you were. That's how you did. And now that I'm like, oh, now I'm the bad person because I'm doing this thing that totally I picked up from you, or, something along those lines. And so I think we should just probably have a better awareness and maybe just a more thorough inner dialogue, of, did I say that out loud? Or like how do I reflect without exposing too much of myself, you know what I mean? But how do I be as honest and open as I feel like I need to be to have my needs met? And what are my needs in relation to this relationship or whatever it is? So I don't know, give and take and give.
Yeah.